So you might have seen the new MacBook Air design leaks by Jon Prosser. I have, and I also have quite a few thoughts on them and a few questions of my own. So, without any further ado, here are my thoughts on the new MacBook Air redesign leak. First of all, props to Jon Prosser for getting the AirTag leak so right, and the iMac colors and the AirPods Max leak. Jon does have a good track record when it comes to product designs, so there is a good chance that this right here is indeed an upcoming MacBook. And the first thing that you can probably tell is that this is a colored MacBook that comes in not 1, not 5, not 10, but 8 colors. Actually, it's my bad, there's only 7. But they are so nice. We have blue, silver, purple, red, orange, yellow, and green. Oh, and I actually had to turn up the saturation to see them better, as they are all so pastel. Now, according to Jon, this new MacBook has very similar colors to the new iMac stands, which are pastel colors as well, compared to the back of the iMacs, which are more vibrant shades. And I'm okay with that. I think they look pretty good, and I'm definitely eyeing that blue one. Now, you probably noticed that I kept saying MacBook and not MacBook Air. This is because, according to Jon, they didn't really know if this was the new MacBook Air actually, as all they got were schematics that showed a new MacBook, and then they made these renders based on those schematics and the info that they had. So, I mean, this could also be a MacBook Pro, right? I mean, if you take a look at the form factor, it does not have that tapered design that the MacBook Air is known for. But according to Jon, this MacBook only comes with 2 USB-C ports, one on each side, a massive quality of life improvement over the current Air, and once you open it up, yes, it has a white keyboard. And white bezels as well. It resembles the new iMac so much that it kind of reminds me of the original iMac and the clamshell iBook combo with those superb colors. I feel like Apple is really giving us a glimpse of the past with these, which I do like. Also, colors on Apple devices have always been aimed at the more entry-level models, as opposed to the Pro models. For example, the aluminum Apple Watch comes in red and blue colors, but not the stainless steel one. The MacBook Air also comes, at the moment, in gold, but not the MacBook Pro. And the 12-inch MacBook came in gold and rose gold, but not the Pros. Same happened with the iPods, where the iPod Shuffles and the Nanos had these super vibrant colors, whereas the Classics were either black or white. It looks to me that Apple's trying to emphasize the gap between their entry-level devices, all of which will feature this new colorful look, and their higher-end devices, which will feature a more mature / a more professional look, and I'm a very big fan of this decision. Also, another reason why this MacBook leak is not a MacBook Pro is because we've had some major leaks from credible sources such as Ming-Chi Kuo and Mark Gurman, who stated that the new 14-inch MacBook Pro will feature an HDMI port, an SD card slot, and even some more ports, which the leaked MacBook Pro schematics have also shown. Which leaves us with 2 options. This leaked MacBook is either a MacBook Air, or it is just a MacBook. Remember the 12-inch MacBook that got discontinued in 2019? Well, this could be the rebirth of the 12-inch. And when it comes to this whole idea, I do have arguments for and against it. My arguments against this being a MacBook Air are the fact that the MacBook Air has always had a tapered edge design. Apple would just not change the design so radically. And the fact that the MacBook Air is only rumored to get a redesign in 2022, so this leak is far too early. My arguments for this being a MacBook Air are the fact that if this is a 12-inch MacBook instead, then what features would a MacBook Air have as extra? Like, we know that a MacBook Pro would have more ports, higher performance with the M1X, and a mini LED display, but the Air? It looks to me that if this is just a 12-inch, the new 12-inch, then the Air would only have a larger 13-inch display and a tapered design. Nothing else. Most people would just not get the Air at all in that case, especially if this cheaper MacBook would have the same M1 chip. Because yes, I don't see Apple releasing an M0 chip just to make this potential 12-inch less powerful. So there is a very good chance that this is indeed a MacBook Air. But I do have one last argument for this, which is also the biggest one, and that's iPad Air. You see, back when Apple launched the MacBook Air, the whole idea behind it was to be the thinnest, the lightest, and therefore the most portable laptop that Apple made. But that changed in 2015 when Apple released the 12-inch MacBook, as that laptop was actually thinner and lighter than the MacBook Air, yet it was not called MacBook Air, but just MacBook instead, which was a name previously used for a laptop that was in between the Air and the Pro. The original MacBook was thicker than the Air, offered more performance than the Air, but it was still weaker than the MacBook Pro, which was Apple's highest-end laptop. The 12-inch MacBook ruined all of that, as it was also considerably weaker than the Air and also more expensive than the Air, making the Air essentially the most affordable laptop that Apple sold back in 2015. And that is still true to this very day, as you can buy a MacBook Air for $1,000 compared to $300 more, which is what you would have to pay for a MacBook Pro. Now, remember when I said that my best argument for this leak being the MacBook Air was the iPad Air? Well, the reason why I said that was because the iPad Air is also a more affordable version of the iPad Pro, rather than being the thinner version of the iPad Pro. In fact, the iPad Air is actually thicker than the Pro. And it also comes in colors too, some of which seem to perfectly match some of these leaked colors of the MacBook Air. What I'm saying here is that Apple has changed their mentality behind the Air name, from something that was supposed to mean ultra thin to something that now just means more affordable. Which is why I do believe that this leak is indeed the new MacBook Air. So then, aside from just these new colors and the white keyboard and the white bezels, is there anything else that's new about this laptop? Well, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but the keyboard now features full-sized function keys, just like the Apple iMac's keyboard. Not only that, but the Touch ID sensor has also been made larger, and it now matches the design of the other keys, rather than being its own unique key like it used to up until this point. Because of this, however, the keyboard sits a bit lower. We actually overlaid an image of the current MacBook Air on top, just to give you guys an idea of how different the new one is. We aligned this based on the FN key, and interesting enough, it seems like the new MacBook Air is actually wider, at least from John's renders, which could point towards a potentially larger display. Now, since the bezels are getting thinner, the display would automatically get larger if Apple does increase the footprint too. So this could as well be a brand new 14-inch MacBook Air, which would then match the upcoming 14-inch MacBook Pro in size. The trackpad is shorter now because of the lower keyboard, and it's also wider than before. Now, this is actually very similar to what we had to do in our 14-inch MacBook Pro concept because of the larger display and the new aspect ratio, so it's pretty nice to see that Apple's mindset matches ours. Speaking of the display, I gotta say, I don't actually dislike the white bezels that much, and that's because this is a laptop rather than a desktop like the iMac is, and therefore the white bezels are much thinner, so they just don't stand out as much. White bezels are also good for web browsing, that's if most of the websites that you browse don't support dark mode already. If you already had one of those old white iPads and you were not too bothered about the white frame, then this MacBook Air would be an even better experience, as that white frame is much smaller now. Overall, I do like the design of the Air quite a lot, and if I were to buy a MacBook Air as a secondary laptop, I would very likely get that blue model. So what about the performance and the battery life? What can we expect to see here? Well, I would easily put my money on this MacBook Air having the M1 chip once again. Especially if this thing comes out this year, I really don't see Apple putting anything more powerful in it. That's mostly because if they were to put an M1X or an M2 in here, it would basically match the MacBook Pro again. And the new Pros will need to stand out from the Air performance-wise in some ways. Okay, so what about the battery life? The current M1 MacBook Air lasts for 18 hours, but this is because it uses the same battery size as the Intel model before it. I don't see the new one getting any worse, but I also do not see it getting any better, especially if Apple plans on making this new MacBook Air this thin. Oh, and speaking of that, it looks like the keyboard is actually pretty noticeably recessed. Even more so than on the current MacBook Air, likely to avoid it from touching the display when the lid is closed, as the new Air is thinner now. And one last thing that I want to mention is the fact that the bottom of the MacBook Air has been redesigned as well. Gone is the belly, and we just have the super thin uniform slab of aluminium, similar to the iPad Pro really, which is lifted by these 2 rubber feet, as opposed to the 4 smaller feet that we have at the moment on the current generation. So there we go. This is what I think about the big MacBook Air leak. Overall, I am a big fan of its design and an even bigger fan of Apple's decision to separate the entry-level and the Pro lineups by colors. Big fan of that. Let me know in the comments, what do you guys think? Who's getting a MacBook Air, and if so, which color are you guys getting the Air in? Don't forget about the AirTags giveaway, which is still going. We're giving 4 of them away, by the way. And if you have enjoyed this video, definitely give it a like, as it does help out the channel. And if you want to see more videos like this one, definitely do consider subscribing, as, you know, it's free. I'm Daniel, this has been Enough Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Enough Tech, signing out. Cheers.